The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. This is the subtitle to Ori Brofman and Rod Beckstrom's collaboration, The Starfish and the Spider. If you love acronyms, here's an easy one. ABCD, Asset-Based Community Development. That's how John McKnight describes work that enhances citizenry and may be the future to democracy. Another work channeled in this Rebellion Dogs Publishing presentation is D. Hawk's One from Many, Visa and the Rise of Chaotic Organizations. The audio and slide deck are from a presentation given on a Zoom group called Growing in Understanding in April of 2025. Using 12-step, 12-tradition, 12-concept organizations such as Alcoholics Anonymous to demonstrate the strength of leaderless organizations, the antithesis of a top-down command and control organizational structure. And we'll also talk about the skills that 12 and 12 members have just from being indoctrinated in this leaderless organization style that become second nature to them, and they can utilize these skills and ideas in their larger community. Maybe now more than ever, this is going to matter.
Joe's presentation will explore the idea that A has lasted because of, and not despite, this 12-step approach, 12 tradition approach, I beg your pardon, Joe, this 12 tradition approach. Now, Joe's going to tell us more about that. Can you unmute yourselves and we say a short version of the set-aside prayer? If you'd like to join in, please do. If not, cool. So using the collective, God,
please
help me to set aside
everything
I think I know, with an open mind to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Amen.
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 For those of us who, let's sit on the other side of the fence, or like to say other alternatives, we'd say this if you'd like to join in for that. So it says, may I seek the serenity
to accept
the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done.
On whatever side of the fence we sit on, we're all thinking of the alcoholic who still suffers and their family members. Thank you very much. So without further ado, it's a pleasure. Indeed, it is an honor, I would even go as far as to say, to present or to introduce Joe Chisholm of Rebellion Dogs. Joe, all yours.
12 traditions we think of as uniquely Alcoholics Anonymous or the broader 12-step, 12 and 12 world. It is unique in many, many ways, but it is also a system. It's a system that is non-top-down, hierarchical command and control, and pro-distribution of responsibility type of structure that isn't unique to Alcoholics Anonymous. And in a mad world where we do all know how these command and control type of top-down structures work, some of us might work inside one. What else could we be doing? What could be more effective? What could create more creativity, more productivity, better spirits, so on and so forth? So a couple of things I want people to go away with. One is we're not sort of quaint. We're doing something that is very progressive these days. And it's also something that we have skills we're unaware of that we can sort of take into the larger community and use, or really think about when we're talking with other people in recovery, whether they're peers or they're newcomers we're working with, or they're, in our sort of family, we could really incorporate the sort of service aspect of things in a way that I think is going to improve the quality of their recovery potentially, the way it certainly has mine. If you don't know me, I'll interview almost anybody about anything. I've written about Q sports, about finance, about the economy, recovery. This character here, some of you might know Paul Williams. He's both from the music industry and from the recovery world. If you're old enough, you might remember him from, Hollywood Squares, or some of the songs he's written for famous artists, or from the Smokey and the Bandit or Planet of the Apes movies. I mean, he's been all over sort of the recovery community and the entertainment community. A lot of what I've written, you can't find. Thefix.com was a great source of talking about things like we talk about here, but their structure, unfortunately, was this sort of top-down hierarchical thing, and it doesn't exist anymore, which is unfortunate. We've talked a little bit about some of the books published by Rebellion Dogs Publishing, and podcasts and T-shirts and coffee mugs and all that sort of stuff too. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the 12 and 12 model. CHAORDIC is just a combination of the word chaos and order, as they work complementary as opposed to fighting each other. There's other names for it, DAOs, which is decentralized autonomous organizations, or leadershipless organizations, asset-based community development. There's a number of ways, and what they all have in common is what they're not. They're not top-down command and control type of operations. So it's less than 70 days. Many of us are going to be in Vancouver, Canada, to celebrate 90 years of AA history. We've survived. I mean, there are critics of Alcoholics Anonymous, but here we are. A lot of really cool and promising organizations have come and gone in our lifespan. And I'm making a case for the way we're structured. We're probably going to be here in another 90 years. That's possible the way we're set up. It's not inevitable. So we still need to be good stewards and mindful of this. And I'm going to introduce the hero of today's story, which is a guy named Dee Hock. He passed away this decade, and he was the founder of Visa Finance Corporation. Then we're going to open it up, and as I'm going, again, please call bullshit. This is a presentation in progress, and any way I can alter or improve it, I would love to. Any personal experiences that this makes you think of, I think the whole group would love to hear about them. Written on the walls, when the power of love is greater than the love of power, the world will know peace. And if you read the newspapers, you know why I'm thinking about that. And how can leaderless organizations save the world? Well, Tradition 5, every group has but one primary purpose. And those of you who know me know I love this one word: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. That's the purpose. The alcoholic that still suffers. That is universal. Every group. That's what we're trying to do here. Is there the purpose? No. Every group has to get their own minds together and decide what their format is going to be, what time of the week you want to be. All of these things are going to influence the types of people we can or cannot help. So where we're going to be, what type of building we should be in, what's available, what we can afford, all that sort of stuff. That's all locally done. That's very chaotic. Here's an expression that comes from who here's read, sorry, we can't all see each other, but The Starfish and the Spider, the unstoppable power of leaderless organizations. And one of the examples they use is peer-to-peer file sharing, like Napster. And it was a peer-based organization where the power came with the users, not with the internal organization. In fact, Congress was able to shut down the main organization, but it didn't end peer-to-peer sharing of files. I mean, that is something that is still going on. One of their expressions is ideology is the glue that holds decentralized organizations together. And our ideology that is shared by everybody is helping the alcoholic who still suffers. We might read this instead of that. We might not read anything, right? We might have speakers. We might have discussion. We might have silence, like a Quaker meeting, until someone has something to say, or a meditation meeting, right? How we're going to help, or it could be more of a social club. We get together, have some formalities, and then we do karaoke, or we go down the street to the cafe or to the pool room or whatever we want to do. And this is a D. Hawkism. Heaven is purpose, principle, and people. Isn't that nice? Isn't it heavenly when, everything is going right with our home group, right? It's principles before personalities, but not without personalities. And we have a sense of purpose. We know what we're doing. Purgatory is policies and procedure. And someone always wants to bring Robert's Rules of Order into our business meeting, so we've got to have some structure here. And then hell, according to D. Hawk, is rules and regulations. And we're going to talk about how, as much as some people want more and more structure, that's going to decrease morale, and it's going to decrease creativity and maybe effectiveness at our primary purpose. So what do you see? Do you see devils? Do you see angels? Or do you see both? This is a piece of art called Circle Limit 4, made in 1960. A lot of cool things were created in 1960. And it is just building on something that came from the 3rd century, which is the idea of yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. There's no interesting song about the devil came down to Georgia without, a hero in it as well, right? It is the whole idea of the dichotomy, the good and evil, the black and the white, the male and the female, needing to work together. There's a little bit of one in each of the other. And that's why a group needs both of these. For instance, in my own sobriety, I need order. I need spontaneity. Have to have both of those things. If I focus on order and that becomes rigidity, it's going to lead to nihilism, right? Without any spontaneity, with total fear of change or adaptation. And if I go so far into spontaneity that it gets into chaos and then it gets into the craziness of addiction, that's not going to work for me either. I've got to be in the middle of that circle and with a foot in each, and that's going to work for me. So, D. Hawk died in 2022. He founded Visa. So he came up with the name Chaotic Organizations. I like it. It's a portmanteau. It takes two ideas and two meanings and sounds and words and puts them together. Brexit was one of these, Britain and exit. Emoticon, emotion, and an icon, right? Breathalyzer, anklet, BIPOC, brunch, right? Having a meal between breakfast and lunch, we call it brunch, right? So he didn't invent the portmanteau, but he created the word chaotic, as far as I know. And it's a yin yang system, needing both. And I talked about that a little bit. This is a quote from a guy named Krishnamurti, a peer of Bill Wilson. He was born the same year Bill Wilson was. Maybe he was in London the same time during at the beginning of the war. Maybe on some of his speaking tours, Bill Wilson saw him in New York City. Definitely, Huxley was one of his students, so he would have been talking to Bill Wilson about some of this guy's ideas. But he talks about it's not a sign of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. Without getting political per se, if you're not feeling good, that might be a sign of good health. When you're in like a toxic relationship, or in a meeting that's gone sour, or a district that's sort of gotten to be more personality, less principle, all that sort of thing. Trust your gut instincts. And this isn't just AA, right? some people still frame it as if you leave AA, it's the last house on the block, there's nothing there. But of course, some of these things have come from AA, whether it's All Addictions Anonymous or NA or CA. DAA is Drug Addicts Anonymous, the first ever 12-step fellowship created outside of the USA. Celebrate Recovery, yes, we are religious. And secular AA, no, we're not. Still AA, but doing it our own way. Women for Sobriety, She Recovers. SOS stands for Secular Organizations for Sobriety. It was created by a guy named James Christopher, and I interviewed him, and he still considered himself an AA member. He still went, but he referred to AA as, in his view, a religion in denial. I don't know if I agree with him, but I thought that was a really catchy bumper sticker. And Life Ring came from Secular Organizations of Sobriety. Smart Recovery may have had the same origins, which is sort of a cognitive behavioral approach to recovery. Wellbriety is an indigenous approach to sobriety. Refuge Recovery would be Buddhist, and from that came Dharma Recovery. They weren't all resentment and coffee pots. Might have been a teacup, or it might have been something else. But this is how this sort of leaderless societies spread. So we're not the last house on the block. So these are 9 principles, and I could do a weekend thing on these and really digging into how we find them in our concepts and our traditions, and we could each take turns sharing on them. But I'm just going to read them out loud just for people who are listening. All chaotic organizations or leaderless organizations are based on a clarity of shared purpose and principle. And they are self-organized and self-governing in whole and in part. They exist primarily to enable their constituent parts. In other words, GSO, our General Service Office, is there really to do the business of AA as dictated by the groups. They're powered from the periphery, united at the core. So again, I was talking about that tradition 5, how each group, it's our responsibility to really zero in on what are we doing here? Why aren't we going to another Friday 5 o'clock meeting? Why are we here? What is our purpose? Not all change is growth, right? If you stop going to one meeting and go to another meeting, it may alter or improve things beautifully. It might be more of the same. We don't know, but this is how it happens, and everyone, of course, has the right to go ahead and do that. It's durable in its purpose and principles, but malleable in form and function. So it doesn't matter what the format of your meeting is, right? We're following the same principles. And why not experiment? The first time I went to, it was an AA meeting, and it was a meditation meeting. Right? I thought, what a great idea. I've been to meditations with trained Buddhist meditators, and it was very quiet and very tranquil. Of course, in an AA meeting, all the newcomers and some of the crusty old timers are fidgeting, and it's quite chaotic in the quiet. And, I thought, this just was a bad idea. But, but that was me. That was my quick to judge. And I continued going to the meeting and really, really enjoyed it. Equitably distribute power, rights, responsibilities, and rewards. That's really important. Like, yes, it's an upside down triangle. That doesn't mean that people at the bottom of the triangle or halfway down the triangle just have to go back and ask the group about every little decision-making process. What font should we use in this month's grapevine? Can we get a vote on that? We need 60%, 66%, right? We don't do that. With every responsibility comes equal authority. That's part of our AA principle, and that's part of how all leaderless organizations operate. We equitably distribute rights, powers, responsibilities. So the group has the right to run itself its own way. When we give someone the job of GSR, their job is to represent the group at the district. But sometimes they're there, even delegates, right? The whole area voted, we favor this choice in this particular motion, but they get there and they hear what the rest of the world is saying and they change their mind. They've got to be allowed to do that. They've got to be allowed to say, no, everybody go home. I've got to go back and take another group conscience. It seems impossible and it works great. Compatible with and foster diversity, complexity, and change, right? One of the things about the general service structure is it doesn't tell other general service structures that it has to do things in Ireland exactly the way we do things in New York. For instance, there's no vetting of groups in any way. If you announce that you have a new BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color meeting, they just give you a group number, send you an introduction package, and if you don't already have a district, they assign you a district if and wish you choose to participate at the level of AA as a whole. In some places, meetings have to be open to everybody. It can't be for a particular demographic. It can't be a women's only meeting, a secular only meeting, an LGBTQ meeting. And that is because that if that's going to change in that particular general service place, it'll have to come from the members, from the groups, not from GSO saying, we don't do that way, so you're going to have to change too. And that's the cool thing about it, because if someone does something that we all disagree with, it's not a popularity contest. They're doing it following their own group conscience, and maybe where's change going to come? Change for the better. If we all do things exactly the way it's always been done, there's comfort in that. And again, changing things just for the sake of change isn't necessarily growth, but where is the growth going to come? I've said here before, and I'll say it again, I love my meeting. It's my favorite group, Beyond Belief, Agnostics and Freethinkers AA group, once in Toronto, Canada. Now it's a Zoom meeting and throughout the world. It's great. But I've been to a bunch of other meetings that I like too. But if I ever went to a meeting where everybody at that meeting got sober and everyone at that meeting got along, I would come back to my group and say, we should change our group to model that group because they've got something going on. So a constant creativity, I think, without that, we have lifelessness, we have reification, and we have, the clock is ticking to the end of our usefulness. Constructively utilize and harmonize conflicts and paradox. And just like in a relationship, conflict doesn't diminish intimacy. It improves intimacy because you're going to put your heads together. You both want this to work, and you are going to get to know each other better by working through this conflict. Groups are the same way, and many times it does appear to be a paradox. How can we have chaos and have order, right? Don't they seem to be one or the other? No, that's the beauty of it, is we need both of those things. And like I said, I didn't trap you here in a tradition workshop under false pretenses, but I would love to talk to anybody, or spend a weekend talking about how these principles. None of this is AA type language, but I see all of them, and you would see them differently, and we'd have a great conversation about that in our different traditions. Like tradition 12, for instance, is about principles before personalities, and we've talked about purpose and principles here, and every AA group has to be fully self-supporting. That's just not putting out some cash, but someone's got to run it. Someone's got to look after it. Someone's got to represent it at the district. Every group needs to be able to sort of function, live or die on its own accord. So D. Hawk, if you really want to get into the weeds with his sort of study of this whole idea, and interestingly enough, AA is like a nonprofit. Our principle is corporate poverty. We don't want to have any assets, and we don't want to have any, perilous wealth. Visa wasn't like that. Visa was a trillion, I think it was the first $1 trillion company. and it was operating with some of the same principles we do. And this isn't to say that top-down hierarchical is bad and this is good. If I was on a plane that was a chaotic organization where someone sitting in 12C could say, now's a good time to land the plane. Let's do that. I don't want to be on that plane. I want the captain of the airplane to be in control, and he would only answer to other people in this hierarchy of authority. That's the flight I want to be on, right? So there's a place for everything. I'm not against something. I'm not an anarchist either. This isn't anarchy. It's leaderless organizations. So some of the sort of, if you bought the book as Dee sees it, which doesn't exist, opportunities out there for anyone who wants to go ahead. Here's some of his great quips. Simple, clear purpose and principles gives rise to complex, intelligent behavior, where complex rules and regulations give rise to simple, stupid behaviors. Now, you tell me if that's wrong and give me a good example of it. But that's what makes AA so filled with life, I think, because again, we have a core principle, but we are completely beholden to use any sort of our own intelligence. We know what we need in our neighborhood for our meeting. Where if there was, this is the program, this is the format, this is how to run an AA meeting, I don't think that would serve us better. For instance, an organizational success has more to do with clarity of shared purpose and common principles and strength of belief, which I believe AA has. I mentioned this last night in an emotional sobriety meeting I was at. Alan Berger would say, the thing about the truth is it's always the truth 100% of the time. And I go, that sounds pretty good, except I hear so many versions of the truth. Which one are we talking about? Right? So there's room for all of these truths. And the most abundant, least used, and most abused resource in the world is human spirit and ingenuity. And if you're at a meeting, go ahead and have this meeting if that's what you want. I'm not saying stop having rules and regulations, right? Should people be limited with how long they can share? It's up to the group. Should people be limited with how they identify? For some people, we want your name, we want your sponsor, we want your sobriety date. And if you don't have those things, we want you to be quiet and listen politely. That's fine. I don't want that at my group, but I'm glad it's keeping you sober at your group, right? So that's the whole idea of the diversity. Desire to command and control is a death wish. Absolute control is a coffin. Control requires denial of life. Life is uncertainty, surprise, hate, wonder, speculation, love, joy, pity, pain, mystery, and 1,000 other things that we can only imagine. And that's where the life comes from. Life is not about control. It's not about getting. It's not about having or knowing. It's not even about being. Life is eternal, perpetual, becoming, or it is nothing. Becoming is not a thing to be known, commanded, or controlled. It is a magnificent, mysterious odyssey to be experienced. That's why I say that a principle that I live by is I wanted to come to this meeting with curiosity and positive regard. I want to go to every meeting with that. I want to start every book, every day, every record on my turntable with that kind of approach, as opposed to the falsely attributed contempt prior to investigation from Herbert Spencer. Success follows those who adapt at preserving the substance of the past by clothing it in the form of the future. So, again, we'll save a debate on rewriting the big book or the plain language big book or GSO is talking in a week from now. One of the things they will consider is looking at the 50-year-old living sober, right? 30 great principles, 31. Are they in today's language? Could they be altered or improved, right? Should we, could we? And even if they go, yes, we should, they'll still have to weigh that against other important considerations with limited resources of human resources and money to spend. But so that's all sort of in this idea of keeping our core ideas. Like we talked about yin yang, that's like from 300 BC, and I wasn't there. Maybe they stole it from somebody else, right? It could have been on a cave painting. But we still need to find a form that works for today's audience. So here's some advice he starts to give. Don't get angry, stubborn, or imperious. Get curious. And the other one is, it's far too late and things are far too bad for anyone to be pessimistic. And he said that when he was still alive. So that was, this book came out in 2005, right? So if things were too late and too bad then, they probably are now. So pessimism isn't going to be helpful. One little example about our 12 and 12 structure and how it's articulated in other languages. Sort of an open system doesn't have central intelligence. The intelligence is spread throughout the system. I don't want to go off base here or think I'm, all in favor of terrorist organizations. But when we hear in the news, we've located the central control of this terrorist organization and we've obliterated it off the map, we're winning. Well, I think they're kind of chaotic organizations too. And without a central command and control, the more resistance you apply to an organization, the stronger it becomes. That's where that sort of yin and yang comes in, right? That chaos strengthens the order, and the order strengthens the chaos. And it's true in our groups. I'll pose a question in a minute about what would happen if GSO disappeared. And so we've got these three concepts that are the right of decision, the right of participation, and the right of appeal. And that's at the group level, that's at the GSO level, that's everywhere along the way, because we want to hear, right? Like if we've barnstormed through an idea and 85% of us are in favor of it, and someone in the 15% can say, can I tell you why I voted against this? They might persuade the 85% that we should keep talking about this because we're only looking out one window in a house that faces in four directions, Tradition 7, we talked about that. Self-support is a lot more than putting up some cash. Our responsibility declaration is self-support, and running the meeting is self-support. So what would happen if we found out that GSO got closed down by its creditors and they had secured all of our books and our offices and shut them down? What would happen to our meeting next Friday? We'd still carry on, right? We would meet again, and we would still do what our purpose is to help the still suffering alcoholic. And maybe we'd form another central office. Who knows, right? Maybe we would figure it out, buy the rights back, right? Who knows? But we aren't dependent on the bottom of the triangle it sure works better if one person is printing the grapevine for everybody instead of every group having to make its own, right? Like I'm all for every part of this structure, but what is the key to our success is 85% of our groups could fail and 15% of them could grow into 10 times that and 10 times that and 10 times that. Like I came into AA when we were under 500,000 members, and then we doubled to 1 million, and then we doubled to 2 million. Of course, I thought that would just keep happening, right? And it hasn't, but it could again at any time. And we've had so much influence on so much else, so we don't really know the whole story. Like I looked at that big poster of all of the groups that have come since AA, not all because of AA, of course, but just having that idea out there that people can get together and one person with a problem talking to another person with a problem can find solution in that sharing. So again, self-organization, self-governing in whole and in part. That's the whole idea. So what? How can this knowledge help me in my recovery, help my group, make me a better old timer or steward or fellow member, or help in my larger community? We can empower our peers to get active in democratically focused, autonomous organization that's responsible for each other instead of being accountable to some governing structure. And I do this in little ways, right? If a sponsee needs to talk, okay, are you free Tuesday? Great. We're going to the detox. Come with me. We'll talk about it. And you can speak, and then we can talk some more on the way back. How's that? Right? Follow the feet of the alcoholic if you want to know what they're really about. You follow the lips, you might get interesting stories. I love my stories, and I love yours too, right? But you follow their feet and you learn a lot more about them. Servitude versus coercive, directive, authoritarian leadership. Like, again, our groups aren't forced to read this at first and then read that second and then end the meeting at this time, right? We decide on all of that, and it's going on all around us. We can take it into the community too. Like I really think problems that are, when I see socioeconomic problems and geopolitical problems, I don't think we need a new leader. I think we need a more informed, more engaged grassroots movement because of my experience in AA. The General Service Office never tells us, we're writing you a new book. It's going to look like this. We tell them, right? They didn't change our preamble. We insisted on it. So all of these things come from a group of people, not everybody. Not everyone gets their way in AA, but everyone gets their say. Everyone gets to weigh in. And just because we've done something doesn't mean we're now beholden to maintain it. We can undo what we have to. And this sort of thing that we've learned here, you have no idea how useful you would be in your co-op on the management board or joining some organization, be it the food bank. I've seen this in management that I've been in companies. I'll say things that are so boring and common sense to any of you here, when they're dealing with a problem of one financial advisor who's going a little rogue, and I'll say, okay, we got to deal with this, but principles before personalities. And they think that's the greatest wisdom they've ever heard, right? I mean, none of you would, but we have skills and ideas and concepts that we can take into the world and maybe make the world a better place. Do our own little bit. We're not going to change everything overnight. And AA members do. A recovery survey done in the UK, and these were done in the US, Australia, and Canada also. But of people in recovery, and this is bigger than AA, but almost 80% volunteer or are engaged in community or civic groups. That compares to 40 or 42% of the general public. Like we go to a lot of meetings, but we also do a lot of good in the community as well. What are some of these other leaderless, chaotic structures? The internet. Nobody's in charge of the internet. Open source software. Wikipedia, is created by its creators and its authors. What's covered there is by the participants in it. So there's a lot of big and small different ways that this sort of AA 12 tradition upside down triangle thing is going on in the world. Okay, so here's a couple of last quotes, and then I think just depending on the time, we might go to Bill, we might just chit chat. The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. This is why the asset-based community development work that enhances citizens and their associations is critical to the future of democracy. And again, if you're concerned about the way the world looks, just Google John McKnight, and you'll find some stuff there. And then one more from the Starfish and the Spider, The Unstoppable Power of Leaderless Organizations. When attacked, I did talk about this earlier, centralized organizations tend to become even more centralized. The harder you fight a decentralized opponent, the stronger it gets. Strange, but true. AA's had its critics, right? It left us more beholden. And AA's has sort of fought against each other as well. It ends up strengthening the whole. A small example would be the Toronto debacle, where they rooted out two agnostic groups from the group meeting list because that was too chaotic, too disorderly, and the whole idea was they were trying to preserve AA. They loved AA. That's why they did it. And what happened, because we're decentralized, is they gave voice to something that not everybody knew about. And by the time those two were put back in, where there were two AA secular meetings in all of Canada, there were 32 by the time they put them back in. So these are what we call unintended consequences. And there's plenty of other examples. The second meeting in Los Angeles, I learned this from a play Jackie B did, where she's done several recovery plays that sort of look at the traditions, the concepts, the steps in a very entertaining way. And so there was one group in LA, and then a brother and sister who were members of the group who had to drive, hours to get there, started another group. And they got a letter from the lawyer of the first group saying, no, we have the charter for AA in California. You must cease and desist. And isn't that funny? Like a third of AA live in California now. This idea that we have to sort of control and contain things, the more you try to do that, the more proliferation it creates. And I think that's one of the things that maintains. I don't have AA figured out. There's mystery to it. If you can figure this out and explain it in 10 minutes to somebody, that would make you like, I would call you the Einstein of our AA. But I agree with all of it. It isn't just the groups ordering the rest of the triangle to behave in the way we want. It's a back and forth thing with those rights and responsibilities spread throughout the organization. And here's a couple of things just from AA. The more we insist on conformity, the more resistance we create. We become rigid, and at that point, we begin to die. Now, that was Bill Wilson speaking to the General Service Conference in 1953. And then Mel B wrote in his book, Living the 12 Traditions, nobody invented AA, it grew. Trial and error has produced a rich experience. Little by little, we have been adopting the lessons of that experience, first as policy and then as traditions. That process still goes on, and we hope it never stops. Should we ever harden too much, the letter might crush the spirit. We could victimize ourselves by petty rules and prohibitions. We could imagine that we had said the last word. We might even be asking alcoholics to accept our rigid ideas or stay away. May we never stifle progress like that. Another interesting example of AA as a chaotic organization is most of us here were here when COVID-19 forced shelter in place. Imagine if we had to sit and wait for instructions on how our virtual meeting should be, what platform it should be on, what the format was going to be. We'd still be debating it. Like it just couldn't have happened, right? But every group had to figure it out for itself. And general service followed by giving us an app and putting the virtual meetings on the app and helping us get sort of not bums in our seats but rectangles in our meeting, and so they had a role in all of that, but the groups had complete autonomy, and imagine what would happen if we were waiting for instructions on that sort of thing and needed conformity in order to get it done. Couldn't happen. I just want to invite people, instead of reading the whole thing, I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to just share one more thing, which I will put in the chat, and everybody can grab it if they want it. But I just want to hear from you a little bit. But this is originally written by Bill Wilson. It's in a pamphlet called The Traditions, How It Developed. So you can get it online and see it. Or if you have a Grapevine subscription like I have, where you have the a virtual one, you can get every Grapevine article ever written. And then this is sort of talking about groups going through their rules and regulations mode, and how, well, we need this to have sanity in our groups, and we can't have lawlessness. And he described the way our worthy alcoholics have sometimes tried to judge the less worthy is, as we look back on it now, rather comical. Imagine, if you can, one alcoholic judging another. And he talks about these appalling conditions must be controlled. This could be in your business meeting, could be at the district. It could be about whether we should, own the original manuscript or not, right? They must be controlled, they think, else AA will surely go to rack and ruin. They view with alarm for the good of the movement. At this point, the group enters the rules and regulations phase. And so it talks about how if we'd made a list of all of the rules all of the groups had, like before the traditions, there were rules. So the central office said, send us your rules. We want to see them. So they put all of them up and asked themselves, okay, if every group had all of these rules, would any of us have made it through the vetting process, right? And they came to the conclusions that our best leaders would not, right? And so he talks about, just in the end here, that process. Perhaps this trend signifies something much deeper than a mere change of attitude on the question of membership. Perhaps it means that we are losing all fear of those violent emotional storms which sometimes cross our alcoholic world. Perhaps it bespeaks our confidence that every storm will be followed by a calm which is more understanding, more compassionate, more tolerant than we've ever known before. So the power of love, not the love of power. So concludes my comments. Over to you, David.
Oh, back to you. Let's unmute everyone. You can unmute Joe. That's wonderful, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was great.
Great
Thank you,
insight.
Jill.
Excellent.
Great job.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Joe, so much. Thank
So clear, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate
That
it.
was amazing.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Are those bots or people, David?
No, real people, Joe.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks
You've
very
earned
much.
it. You've earned it over years and years of commitment to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Now, listen, let me just tell you what we have next week, and then we go back to Joe. While we have Joe here, I want to really take advantage of that. So here we go. So tomorrow, those of you who weren't here in the beginning, Joe's Rebellion Dogs Publishing published a book by Bill Schaberg, and it's titled 30 Things. And Joe spoke about it at the beginning, and we read it every Saturday at 11 a.m. on the East Coast and 4 p.m. in the UK, and we're on 26 of it already. So we're on 26 of 30, and it's titled number 26. Each chapter's got a different title, and this one's 26 of 30. You need to have the conversation before the conversation, and Schaberg puts that in. Joe, tell people quickly, if you wouldn't mind, not quickly, but just tell people in your own way, please.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the basic premise of this is how to deal with something difficult, and it's great advice, right? As opposed to, like, if I'm dealing with my kid, he's on his Nintendo, and there's something I've really got to talk to him about his, last mathematics mark. I'm going to say to him, Jesse, you're busy. Continue with what you're doing, but I've got a conflict. I need to talk to you about your math. When can we have that conversation? That's a way more effective way than saying, drop what you're doing. My needs have to be met. It's just more of a good conversation starter than save time, see it my way.
No, absolutely. But the subtitle is Practical Advice for Living Well. What a great subtitle it is. And as I said, Joe's Rebellion Dogs Publishing put it together. And I just quickly want to just bring it to your attention because I've got so much from it, and I'm sure lots of people will come to the meeting. We get so much from it every week. They all link into each other at the end. You can see a lot of the 12-step recovery program in it as well. It's fantastic. Just the title cover of it, should I say. 30 things, practical advice for living well. Wonderful. So pay attention to what you pay attention to. That's just another fantastic one there. So thank you for putting that together, Joe. Sunday we're writing the big book, The Creation of AI, and we're on chapter 9. We're reading chapter 9 on that one, and that's Hank's ideas, and Hank Parker started, of course. And Joe done a wonderful interview with Bill Shaberg when that book, writing the big book, came out back in 2019. I'll put a link into the chat for that shortly. And what a great interview that is. Eamon is here, so this is a wonderful meeting they have going on here. Eamon seems to be getting all these. I didn't realize there were so many people sober who's over 40 years, Eamon.
Thank you, David. Every Sunday we have a long-timers speaker meeting where all the speakers are over 40 years sober. And this week, it starts at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And this week we have Dan D from India, Atlantic, Florida, who is 45 years sober, telling his story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eamon. If you want to learn more about, I'll go to a meeting for tradition. Jim Worley, fantastic presenter, a brief history of the 12 traditions. He's doing that on Sunday, May 4th. So it's next Sunday he's doing that one. Again, if you want more information, that'll be on our website, but I'll put it in the chat shortly. Rob is not here tonight. He's gone away for a holiday with his lovely wife. Let me go in there. No one else is coming in. Joe, it's to do with anarchy. I believe that we are an anarchy, well, I believe isn't, but he does call it in Tradition 1 that this bunch of anarchists, so can this function. I believe in that that anarchy, not in the ones wearing the spike hair. No, I'm not into that, but he calls it the benign anarchy, the gentle types. I'd like to think that, I don't like to be told what to do, in the sense that, lead by example and leadership, Joe. He does say in Tradition 2, he said the lack of leadership is our problem. Wilson says in that one, it's different, and we do have leaders, but they don't govern us. And that's back to the anarchy thing. He says that brings us straight to the question in Tradition 2. Does he have he calls it a real leadership, like the real alcoholic? Most emphatically, the answer is yes, notwithstanding the apparent lack of it, he says. So just my two things, Joe, back to you.
It's not even the words versus these words, it's the definitions of the words. We all need to have leadership in how we work with newcomers, how we run a meeting, how we tell a coherent story as best we can, right? In a top-down hierarchical organization, I can be fired by the guy I work for, right? That can't happen in AA. No group can be fired, no individual can be fired. So those leaders are leading by example as opposed to holding power over those that serve them. So yes, leadership is a fine, benign word, and anarchy is even a fine, benign word. But in a true anarchy, there's no shared values. It's everyone for themselves, right?
Okay.
And so here, we might do things completely differently, but that inherent value that, I've never been to an AA meeting that I didn't know was an AA meeting, right? Like, they run things completely different. I'm in a different country, but, I can recognize it.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the qualification. Jersey Jeff.
Yes, thank you, David. Thanks for your lead today. And Joe, that was an awesome presentation I would even go so far as to say mind blowing. You stretched my imagination quite a bit, and I've got to go back and listen to it and go through it. I had two comments and one question for you. First, I loved at the end when you were talking about that whole thing about the rules thing, right? Which of course led us to tradition 3. I was once doing a presentation on tradition 3, and I wondered what were some of those rules, right? Do they still have them? So I reached out to Michelle Mirza, the archivist, and she sent me a bunch of those rules, and they were so comical, and they were mostly about groups having slip committees, right? You had a slip committee, and if you slipped the first time, you had to do this. If you slipped the second time, you had to do that. If you slipped the third time, you might have to wait and buy another big book. It was really quite comical, but it was very interesting. The one slide that really leapt out to me in your presentation was the one where you were talking about the 9 different principles of chaotic organizations. And then you really blew my mind by doing something that is really something I'm very interested in. You said what traditions, what concepts were associated with that particular principle. My service sponsor and I have started a meeting on Friday nights, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, called Living Our 36 Principles, where we look at how the steps, traditions, and concepts all work together. So that was really cool. I really like that. And my question for you is, you talked about the 5th tradition, responsibility. If you look through the traditions, it really talks about a variety of responsibilities. You mentioned the 7th step responsibility. It starts out in our first tradition with our common welfare being our responsibility, primary purpose. Each one of the steps are trusted servants, we don't govern, et cetera, et cetera. As you go through each one of those, there's a set of responsibilities. I'll throw in concept 1 responsibilities to know what's going on in AA, like as our conference starts this year. But do you see chaotic organizations really talking more about that whole concept of responsibility that they have to the members of their organization? Or is that something that's kind of a focus of AA?
Oh, that's interesting. I would say yes, maybe not using the same language that we use. For instance, in the case of DHOC and Visa, like every sort of branch office had its own problems and its own way of working things out, right? And so they had, again, they had responsibility equal to their authority.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you so much, Joe, for your presentation.
Yeah,
I'd like to reach out and have a discussion at some point.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it for sure. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I'm glad you're here, Jeff. Wonderful.
Thank you, Jersey Jeff. And we're going to our good friend on the top of the hill, Hugh H.
Hey, everyone. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Hugh H. And Joe, I've seen your presentation on chaotic organizations before. Obviously, you put some more work into it. Would you consider, I'll give you some examples, but some social organizations and political organizations to be chaotic? For example, I'll give you a couple of examples. The civil rights movement. It certainly had leadership, but it had a lot of characteristics of chaotic organization. Another one would be the protests against the Vietnam War. Same thing. And I would even go so far as to say that perhaps even our political parties in the United States anyway are chaotic. Nobody pushes me around in the party that I belong to. All they do is ask for money and votes. But I can participate to the extent that I want to and try to influence people in the party as much as I want to or as little as I want to. So what do you think about those thoughts?
I think it's impossible to be completely free of this sort of, because this is natural. This is how the universe works. right? There's order and chaos in the universe. There's order and chaos in nature, and and in human life, So we get together, and some of that's going to come through. I wouldn't even pretend to understand like political structures. Like I vote and I comment on Facebook, but I know enough to know I know a little. But I would love to take a look at these things and see what we see, right? And ask some other people. And
we all know organizations that are not chaotic, like, IBM or the federal government or any government, really.
Yeah, but again, where I say
they're really low on chaos.
Yeah, there are those things. Also, in America, there are no positions for life in terms of elected officials, right? They might get. There's the whole Supreme Court thing for sure. They're kind of like they're like popes, right? Many of them are going to die in office. In the other branches of government, in some cases fixed terms, and in some cases you got to get your ticket punched again, or you're out of there. And so in that way, the people are speaking, right? That we the people is more than window dressing. I think it really is the ethos of, in the case of the American political scenario.
But when the government decides that it's going to deport you, your options are limited.
Let's not go into that directly now. We can do that in the meeting after the meeting. But I think
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But those are all things that are great to look at under this lens, right? And we might find, better ways of doing things for sure.
Thanks again, Joe.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got the man who put the key players into AA, or told us who the key players are, Mr. Bob Kennedy.
Yeah, thanks. There's a mention of the Vietnam War. I was at the University of Toronto in the Vietnam War years, and we had a disproportionate number of Americans there, people that didn't want to die, I suppose. I'm not sure. Anyway, David Kennedy, our friend Joe C. was in fabulous form today, I thought. And I've seen this presentation before. I was at a party about a year and a half ago, and he made this presentation. Everybody was telling him to shut up and get out of the way of the potato chips, but he went on with it. But he was way better today. I was reminded of a comment Bill Wilson made. AA has had a lot of non-alcoholic friends. We forget that sometimes. And, only people that know anything are alcoholics. Some people seem to convey that message. Anyway, one of our non-alcoholic friends says to Bill Wilson, you have no organization here. He had just come up with the 12 traditions. And there's no discipline. This is almost an anarchy. And Bill Wilson says, we get our discipline from alcohol. And, what a great answer that was. And, Bill Wilson, I got a lot of regard for Bill Wilson. I'm seen as picking on him in a couple of areas. I love that he was a human being with foibles like the rest of us, but some absolute genius ideas. And I'm not the only one to ever say that the 12 traditions have probably been more important than the 12 steps. And not that the 12 steps aren't important, but if a few details were different, I think we'd be okay. But he totally nailed the traditions. Anyway, thank you, Joe C. My question is, you mentioned some heathen conference, ICSA, or whatever you call it. Is it true that the handsome Canadian will be one of the principal speakers at that upcoming event in September? Thanks.
Oh, you mean in Vancouver?
No. This fake AA thing you've got, ICSA, where you get together. Yeah, they're having a convention in September, and I hear one of the principal speakers is a handsome Canadian, Bob Kay, and that's just. And I heard
That's
it also.
right.
it will be simulcast on CNN as taught. Thanks.
Yeah. I already put $10 in for the hair and makeup for that. I think that's going to be great.
Brilliant stuff, guys. Great to have you here. Tim L is in Chattanooga.
Maybe a bit of an arcane question, but I've always been a little baffled by the role of the chairman, particularly in intergroup meetings, to where, at least here, and it may not be universal throughout AA since we are chaotic, where the chairman doesn't really have a vote, unless it maybe comes down to a tie. Is that a universal thing throughout AA? Is that role of the chairman of being more like the vice president's role in the U.S. Senate of really only being there and voting if it breaks a tie? Is that a common practice of chaotic organizations, or is that somewhat unique to AA? And where is it founded in these traditions of AA structure?
It is that whole idea, I think, is post traditions, and it's a small T tradition. So certainly, I've seen committees where the chairperson votes on everything, right? In fact, the chairperson often brings up many of the motions to be discussed. But correct me if I'm wrong, it may be a Robert's Rules of Order idea, right? Where the whole idea of the chairperson is to be neither for nor against. Hugh, can you speak to that?
I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if it's Robert's rules, but it's a kind of a parliamentary thing. And you got it exactly right. The idea is the chair should be impartial and not be taking sides. And if he wants or she wants to take a side, they should have an alternate chair take over while they're making their case. When I was chair, my delegate was constantly after me to vote, even though I was trying to follow the rule that, I'm not going to take sides on these issues unless it's a make or break a tie. But that's not unusual, but it's certainly not necessarily true everywhere in AA. She was mad at me because nobody had ever done that before in my area.
Well, let's find out about Area 44.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm an alcoholic. It's more of a little T tradition, but as when I was standing for area chair, my service sponsor said to me, Jeff, for the next 2 years, you have no opinion. I said, what do you mean, Linda? I have no opinion. She says, well, you're going to be sitting up there in front of the group. You're going to be running the area assembly. People are going to come to the mic. They're going to say the stupidest things. And you can't roll your eyes. You can't do one of the Homer Simpson, smash your head. You just have to basically wait till they're finished, thank them, and move on. But the other thing was that, from the time I was alternate chair through the time I was delegate, I never went to the mic to express an opinion, right? Because I could sway people, and that was not my role, right? However, in my area, I still had a vote. So I could still vote. I could still voice minority opinion if I had to, but I would never comment on things that were going on. So that's just the kind of way we did it in my area.
You might even know or remember Joe Downey from Area.
I knew Joe. I knew Joe. Yeah.
And he was unknown. He was a mentor to me because at the area assembly, he'd be talking about the business of the general service office, and he'd bring up some very contentious issue, and he'd say on one side, and he'd explain it. I'd go, yeah, that's right. And then he'd say, and on the other side, the concern is, and I go, yeah, that's right. I go, I don't even know how he feels about it. And I saw that as such a great statesman type of quality to be able to express both sides of a contentious issue that people are going to line up pretty quickly on one side or the other of this issue, and not try to put a thumb on the scale and sort of influence how the rest of the room was going to feel about it. So that's
we have two types of trusted servants, right? We have elder statespeople, like you just described, Joe, and then we've got the bleeding deacons. And the bleeding deacons are more than happy to tell you their opinion on every single issue that comes up before the assembly.
Maureen H is here. Hello, Maureen. Thank you for the service you're doing tonight.
Hey, David. My service sponsor says that we wear Robert's rules like a loose garment, and that it's the purpose of the chairperson to make sure everyone has an opportunity to share regardless of their contentions, and that so that the group conscience can make an informed decision. And then also I put in the chat that little busy slide you had with about the concepts. There's a YouTube video that goes with that. And I apologize because when I pulled that up, you have to skip through the advertisement. And then also the I'm so fortunate in that my sponsor was very thorough, and I had the opportunity to read the AA pamphlet on how the traditions were developed. And I really, really loved your presentation, and I sent you an email for the slides. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anybody, if you haven't checked the whatchamajigger.
Yeah, the chat.
The chat. Yeah, thank you. Wordsmith Joe here. If you send me your email to news@rebelliondogspublishing.com and you want a copy of the slides, they're yours. And if you want a copy of that Tradition 3 early thing, I've put that in the chat and you can help yourself. But if you're on a phone, that's going to be a problem, maybe downloading it. So by all means, just get in touch with me, phone me, text me, or email me, and be happy to share. And thanks, Maureen, for putting up that video that was made in the UK, and it's a beautiful explanation of the concepts coming alive. And Kenji, I don't know if you've been here the whole time, but Kenji influenced the evolution of this presentation. He just had one comment. He said, a little less of the DHawk stuff and more about how it applies to AA. Like he was channeling Ernie Kurtz. Joe, context. Always have context, and that's exactly what it needed. And thanks again, Tim, bringing up the one issue that really spurred conversation. That's great.
So, Joe, will you close? No, I'll tell you, Joe, would you do this for us? I was thinking of this. Will you read is it long? I don't know if to read. I'll just read. Will you read from your book today, Beyond Belief? How's that for a way to close the meeting?
Oh, sure. Okay. April 25th. In our country, we're pretty good at responding to crisis. We're not very good at avoiding it. This was by Albert A. Bartlett, who we lost in 2013. No matter how much worse life got when we were using, we lowered our expectations instead of curing the problem. We could have quit. We could have avoided hurting ourselves and hurting others, but we kept spiraling down into rationalization and cognitive dissonance. Media, government, and the stock market prefer to respond to symptoms rather than to confront the cause. Today's author, a physics professor, applied arithmetic to the contradiction of sustainable growth, and he tries to impress on students the modest growth of 5% per annum will turn every billion people into 8 billion within 50 years. How is that sustainable? Environmental decline, peak oil, the peak everything, and examples of how people in the plural are even more disinclined to face the truth than people in the singular. James Joyce wrote in the early 20th century, history is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. What Joyce was sharing with people with addiction is that history will be a nightmare today if we are repeating the mistakes of our past. To be trapped in monotony is a nightmare. Even if we are fully cognizant of our misdeeds, we will repeat the cycle if we don't awaken from the denial about the futility of the paths we trudge. In our hearts, we know when we are being self destructive. The nightmare is the repetitive history of our addiction cycle. In despair, we find the support of others and we feel a glimmer of hope that the cycle will end. Instead of reconciling ourselves to criticism, to crisis management, we take steps to arrest our addiction. We begin to see our own potential. Integrity is one of the byproducts of living well, free from the enslavement of insatiable needs. We begin looking after ourselves, contributing to family and community, and becoming mindful of responsible stewards of planet Earth. Do I live in the nightmare of repetitive cycles? How do I now avoid hardship, which I used to grin and bear? Do I endure consequences that I can avoid?
Oh, we want to go into tomorrow's one already, but we're not going to, Joe. We're going to stay in the day. Thank you for that. That was great. Will you now close in the manner of your choosing? Thank you, Joe.
Okay. You asked for it. Unmute
Yes.
everybody. Here we go. This is group
There we go.
participation. And I don't have a slide for this, but if you're not familiar with it, just follow the
Yes.
rectangle beside you.
Bouncing ball.
Yeah, I wish we're going to have to do that. It's on my to-do list. So just please participate if you like, stare in horror if you prefer. But it goes like this. If you're sober and you know it, clap your hands.
Clap your hands.
If you're sober and you know it, clap your hands. If you're sober and you know it, and you really want to show it, if you're sober and you know it, clap your
Clap
hands.
your
Thanks,
hands.
David. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, David.
Gotta run. Thanks.
Wow. That
Thanks,
was
everybody.
Mike,
That was great, Joe.
I'll do log in. Hold on just a second. I'll log in. Stop the recording at that point. We come back.